Hi, you're still watching a series of discussion. This is not the first one that I've done, but it's on the sideline of the Big Data World Show, Malaysia, harnessing the power of big data in Asia. What do we do about this big data? But I guess for some of you out there, we have to take 2 steps back. We have got to look at big data, the thinking behind it, what is it, and how does it change our life? And as so often we do on Astro Awani, it's always great to hear from people who've gone through the motion themselves, and especially, you know, they're not like me, they're not in coat and tie, so you know that they are very, very trustworthy. So I want to introduce to you my 2 special guests for today. Peter Bakas, thank you so much for making time. You're the CEO of DataScale, and we have Steve Curry, the president of Metacloud. I will ask them to introduce their companies later, but I want to start with this very basic question. Our government, Malaysian government, has committed to the big data thinking. And, you know, we have a specific agency, we have task force looking at this, we have commitment to say that the public machinery will be adopting big data to improve delivery to the people and all that. But before we go down all those roads, I guess it's good for the people themselves to really understand the philosophy of big data. So who would like to do this preschool of big data honors for me?
So big data generally is defined as a collection of data sets that's too large or complex to use traditional tools. So if you look at big data, it could come from anywhere, from any type of data source, from your mobile phone, from sensors, from websites that you go to. And when you have this amount of data, it could be structured, unstructured, or semi-structured, machine language, or machine logs. What do you do with that data to then gain insights? And I think that's when you look at big data, it's sort of that collection of all these different data sets coming from a variety of different endpoints that kind of create this complexity.
I guess if we look at ourselves as being in the information age, some are even saying information 2.0 and 3.0, and then this phrase or term K economy, knowledge-based economy, this is it. I mean, this is kind of discussion that will bring us to the next level, because like it or not, the data will be there anyway. When I log on my smartphone, my telco would know what I'm doing, where, and you know, examples like that. They can, using GIS, match it to something else. So I guess what we're saying is, as long as the data are there anyway, and those are big amount of data, like I don't even know what petabyte or terabyte is exactly, but I do know, I can imagine the scale. But these are per second now, which was generated maybe a day or a year or months before. They are generated in the quantum of seconds now, or milliseconds. So I guess if you have such big data, the question is, how do you make it relevant to the people? Because at the end of the day, it must go back to the user and how it fits the user. So if you can please explain that, and how would that be the link for your experience in this?
Well, I think for corporations, you know, big data means more revenues for them, better understandings of how their customers utilize their services or their buying patterns. And then I think if you contrast that with consumers, people who interact with big data, everyone's interacting with big data every day. I was talking to Peter this morning, and a lot of applications that you use on your smartphone, on your iPhone, there's big data that's being pulled off of that. There's data being pulled off of that and analyzed in a way that helps the application creators understand how you're using the application so that they can make it better. So for example, if you're scrolling through movies that you might want to watch, Peter gave a great example. Like if you're not scrolling down past maybe the first page or the second page, they've really got to make sure the things that are relevant to you appear on that first page. So you're interacting with big data every day, whether you know it or you don't know it. But for corporations, it makes a huge difference in their revenues and their profits.
Just like I can't stay off the chocolate chip cookies, I can't stay off of the digital cookies now, right? They will ask me that, because that's part of how big data thinking is. If you know the likes and dislikes, the frequency of visits to what particular sites. So, for example, if I go to the New York Times, then from there, suddenly there will be suggestion for me, you might want to look at this new model of car, or you might want to look at this particular tech story, for example. So that is all fine and good, but from the user perspective, there's also a lot of fear that there's already like this clutter and chaos of data. And some of them will and can be used against me. For example, I'll go to security later, but I guess if the data are already out there, how does it work with the traditional structures of institutions that we have? Let me clarify. If they are governments, they deal with data anyway. So, but maybe with big data, they can make it more efficient because the data will actually mean something first, means something better because you are linking it, networking it to build more messages that's important. Or am I wrong in that respect?
I mean, you're correct, right? So people talk about, you'll hear people talking about big data or small data or fast data. Really what people want is useful data, right? And you talk about what the government's doing with big data. It's, you could apply big data to how do I become more efficient? How do I run my departments more efficient? You look at sensors, and I mentioned that now we have billions of devices. It's your phones, it's wearable devices. You have sensors that could go into fields that can sense how much water crops are getting, and it could predict. You build algorithms and how to increase your crop yield. And so I think that's where you start looking at what some of the things that you can start applying and how it fits back, right? Wearable devices. There's a ton of medical information that hospitals can get and understand what kind of treatment is working for a patient and it's not working for a patient. So I think that's when you start looking at from an end user perspective. You have from a consumer, you have entertainment like Steve mentioned where you provide personalized an experience. But you could do things like traffic control. You can do crop yields, train schedules,
disaster warnings.
How do I harvest all these sensors and all this data in such a way that I can then have useful data? And I think ultimately that's what you want to get to. So like I said, you'll hear people talking about big data, fast data. It's useful data.
I want to pick this one slice out of it, which is, it sounds like it's a disruptive innovation. So if it's disruptive, what's going to be disrupted? I have to go for the first break. Once we are back, because they're wearing jeans and not coats and ties like me, I'm going to ask them that question because they just know whose boss answers is going to come after this, right after this short break. Thank you so much for still watching this special recording on the sideline of Big Data World Show Malaysia. And I have two very interesting. I shouldn't put you as subject matter expert. I'm going to put you as big data evangelist. So I'm going to go to my previous question that disruptive innovation sounds disruptive, but it creates new opportunity. But let's tackle that disruptive or what's going to be disrupted first, because I think new ways, innovation, just means that we do things better. Of course, when we do things better, we've got to leave the old things that is not as good. So if you can please, from your experience and from your company experience, see how you're not only looking to improve the current things, but create totally new stuff that we don't have to do it the old way.
Yeah, I actually have a really good example, and I'm stealing this from you, Peter, so I apologize for that. We live in California, have a lot of earthquakes,
Yes.
and it's a lot of times people think about big data as ways to analyze events, and you would think a ways of analyzing events is taking in data from traditional means, computers, sensors, etc. But we recently had an earthquake in Northern California, and a company that makes these wearable devices that monitor your health, your heartbeat, when you're awake, when you're asleep. The company took that data when the earthquake happened and measured how people felt the earthquake as they woke up. It could measure the population waking up in real time and telling how far the earthquake spread and how it affected the population. And that's really measuring an event in a way that you would never think to.
Okay.
But because of big data, you were able to collect these events and think, wow, this is an interesting way to really put together data in a way we would have never thought to measure it or see it.
Yes.
But the computer could, the tools could, and it produced something that's really relevant to, at least at that time, the Californian population.
So it's only our imagination and what we know that's stopping us from really doing amazing stuff with big data.
Yeah, and I agree there. I think we're still kind of in the infancy of both the data that we're collecting as well as the tools that we have to build and analyze. And what we're doing today is not what we're going to be doing tomorrow. We haven't thought of what we could do with the data we have, right? Historically it's been get data, store it, and we'll figure something else out later. And I think that's kind of the cusp that we're at right now is as we get better at making the data available, there's going to be new industries that are going to be born out of that. And traditional ones are going to be disrupted, right? When you talk to companies about big data, it's no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. It's how you get a competitive advantage. It's how you provide better customer support. It's how you get operational efficiencies. It's how I decide what products I should launch. And so if companies aren't embracing it, those companies are quickly going to fall behind either their competitors or new companies are going to be born that are going to take that opportunity to become a data-driven company.
From your experiences, is it easier to push big data thinking to enterprises and corporate people in America? Because that's Silicon Valley there, it's a no-brainer, right? If it comes out from California, it must be good, for example. So do you find it like that? Or do you find that as you go around the globe, it's not necessarily like that?
Do you want to take that?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's more talked about in the States, but when you talk to industries across the globe and you bring up things like operational efficiencies, how can I predict failures? How can I determine risk? I'm a financial institution. I want to be able to determine risk. I think those apply across the globe. It's not just U.S.-based companies that are more adept to taking that leap. I think it's a global phenomenon.
So is it true that the Malaysian government is way ahead compared to even some developed nations on this? I'm sure you've been to a lot of conferences and discussions on this.
I think what the government is doing here, the initiatives, are definitely in the right direction, right? It's taking notice of a trend and where things are going, and it's making that investment now.
Yeah, I think what we see is that what's important is to be engaged. The government's engaged here, and in a lot of places we don't really see the government's engaged. And the fact that the Malaysian government is engaged in helping, foster the movement towards big data, I think that's key. It's absolutely key.
So the door is open. It's not like gate is closed. But how do you build from there? How do you use the living room, the kitchen to make the house working? So I guess that's the next level that we must be looking at in Malaysia. And for that to happen, I guess the consciousness of the everyday people need to be there. We need some hero somewhere. Doesn't have to be a nerd, but since movies are like that nowadays, a nerd that picks up this, and voila, the next Bill Gates or whoever, the Malaysian version at least. So I guess that must be the promise, because if you follow the 20th century style, if you've got to work with a company before, learn the trick of the trade, and then go out and find capital and all those stuff. But since you guys are engines anyway, so can we give a bit of hope here for those who aspire to be technopreneurs in this country to look at big data, since the government is already engaged? The gate is open, just go in and do something about it.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. It's going to happen. I think there's so many ways. Big data touches everything. Actually, it touches entertainment, consumer, business, government. So there's actually so much opportunity out there. I think someone just needs to pick a niche that they're really passionate about. Peter and I are both entrepreneurs. We both started companies, and it began with passion to do something, passion to go out and change something in a big way, solve a big problem, because that's what we really wanted to do.
Start with a problem. Don't say that, gee, I don't know computer programming. Gee, I don't know anyone who have seed funding. So how did you do it?
So I think the unique thing here is that we're both not programmers.
Yeah.
We just
Cool.
we're really passionate. We have a strong history in technology, so it's because we were passionate about technology. And I didn't really worry about raising money. I worried about trying to solve that problem.
Okay.
And raising money was just something that happened along the way of
It will
going out
happen
and solving
anyway.
that problem. Yes. If you're solving a problem and people start to recognize that there's a lot of potential here, the money will find you.
Cool. I like that. So I'm going to borrow that quote often. But we have to go for the next and last break. But once we are back, maybe we break it down a little bit more, go a bit more micro. Which specific area would you suggest from your experiences for the youngsters out there to look at? Because it might be too big for them to look at. If I take out some points from all the presentation just now, there was this presentation on real time, because warehouse data is historical, it's good, yeah, but it's better to know real time. Then somebody from the government agency was saying, we want to look at these three key industry, telecommunication, whatever else. But I guess the limit is only your imagination. For example, even if it's not mentioned, but if you map big data to education, oh my God, think of the things that can be done. So let's get tips from Peter and Steve after this, because there's no better way than to ask the entrepreneurs themselves who have done it, still doing it, and they're going to keep on doing it right after this short break. Big data is not a term for you to be afraid of, but a term for you to be embracing, because that might make you the Bill Gates of Malaysia, or Steve Jobs if you like it, or even Mark Zuckerberg. Take your pick. But I have lesser known names, but they're very important for big data. They might be the Gates. In 5 years' time, we might know it. That's how we always receive things on this side of the world. So Peter and Steve, if you can give your own take on, if there's an entrepreneur here that wants to embark now on big data, which particular area would you advise them to go into?
So I think that the key is to go into an area that you just absolutely love and have a passion for, because you have to wake up every day wanting it. I recently heard a story about a local entrepreneur who I think has just done an amazing job, who created an app to help solve a little bit of the transportation problem in regards to taxis and getting taxis and being able to find taxis in time to get to work, and create an application that solved a lot of those problems. He did that because he was passionate about solving that specific problem, and he became an absolute success because of it. So I think it's really about focusing on what you're passionate about.
But for big data, because it will come with the big names first, the big enterprises that give big enterprise data solution first. So I guess for entrepreneurs, looking at that, it's not to look at that directly, but with that empowerment for enterprises, what's next?
Well, and I think actually it's not the large enterprises that are leading this. It's really the open source community. It's the small innovative companies that are moving quickly. If you look at everything from OpenStack to Hadoop to Cassandra to Spark, it's open source community that's driving this. And what's happening is there's a pressure on the enterprises to adopt these. So in this case, it's the enterprises that are following, but the smaller companies that are innovating and the open source community that are innovating. And so if you look at where are there opportunities, and to Steve's point, it should be something that you're passionate about. It could be education, right? What are the best ways that people learn, right? Can I build an algorithm that can most efficiently deliver the learning material for students? Is it healthcare? Is it the infrastructure, right? I think that going back to Steve's point, it's determining what you're really passionate about, and then the possibilities are endless.
I want to be in the mind of certain young guys out there. For example, Candy Crush. Most of them know it, even if they don't play it. And today at the presentation, we hear how they use big data because they look at how their marketing goes to the pattern of usage. For how long, what do they buy, are we selling this right? So imagine if I look at the education system in Malaysia, and I want to gamify it. Because sometimes it's too boring. We've been looking at all these Iron Man movies, and we expect for the PowerPoint slides to come and with all our motion like that and displays all over. But in reality, we don't have that. But the next best thing I can do is to take it from chalk and talk in the class to maybe something that resembles the icons of what I like Candy Crush or Farmville or whatever else. So would that be a crazy idea for somebody in Malaysia to think about, or what do you think?
I think the education system is ripe for disruption, right? In the United States, it's happening. Everything from how students consume information to how they interact with it. If you look at the universities and delivering courses online, it's now the barriers for people to gain education are being brought down because of technology. And this is kind of a broader, not necessarily big data, but I think it applies across the board. So I think looking at the education system and is it working, just because it's been that way, is this how it should be? How can we become more efficient?
We know it's not that much fun.
Yeah, that is very true.
So we can bring fun into it.
We can bring fun into it.
Big data can do that.
And people, it's been shown that if you have an engaged audience, they're more apt to learn and contribute back. So I think, gamifying some portions of the education would be an interesting idea. So
application is the key, the holy grail right now. Do you agree?
I think software is absolutely the holy grail. If you look at software today, to Peter's point earlier, it's been extremely disruptive. Startups have been extremely disruptive to the existing kind of legacy enterprises, and open source has really been leading the way. We've seen enterprises go from the leaders to now the followers of some really small companies, and we've seen large enterprises potentially missing earnings and suffering a little bit because of these small companies that are producing something that's exactly what users or companies have been looking for, and it's because we're super hungry. We want to go out and find that success, and everything that we've built, 100% of our company demands that we do go find that answer, we do go find that success. But for a large corporation, it's just a thin slice. So there's a lot of passion, as I mentioned earlier, from us to go and find that. We have to. It's our mission.
So who cares if we don't have Silicon Valley in Malaysia? It might mean it's more risky for a would-be technopreneur in this country as opposed to a would-be technopreneur in the USA. But maybe that will drive this technopreneur here hungrier and more passionate to do things.
It's global. I think location. It's those boundaries are going away. You see innovation across the entire globe. And people are solving local problems or solving global problems. I don't think it's,
It can come from anywhere.
It can come from anywhere. It's just having the passion. If there's a problem, you see a problem that you want to solve it.
Yeah, we're a company of 40 people, and we're a global company. We have customers in Asia, customers in Europe, all over the world. And it's because those particular customers were looking for the innovation that we were providing. We didn't have to go out and even be in those countries. We don't have a sales presence or a team presence there, but we're providing solutions for customers on a global basis. It just happens. And I think that's because all the tools are available. The internet is here, big data is here. Everything that a person needs to be successful, to be a global company in a really quick manner, it's here today.
Just go online.
Just go and do it, yeah.
Would you hold a hand of somebody from Malaysia?
Happily.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
cool.
happily.
So go and find Peter and Steve online.
Please do.
They promised
Absolutely.
that on this show.
That's right.
I will back them. I say, yeah, I remember them saying that. Okay. Thank you so much, Peter and Steve, for making time. Thank you so much. This is priceless. It's always the real experiences, So thanks to you for watching. As usual, you know the platforms to use: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just communicate with us your own views, or you can straight away download the iOS and Android applications on your favorite mobile gadget, and you can watch shows like this live. So I'll see you in another episode very, very soon. Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.